The day had begun like any other for Eli, the human servant on Lady Zora's vast estate. His hands were calloused from years of hard labor, scrubbing floors, tending to the garden, and doing whatever his alien masters required. The estate was immense, a mansion built from stone that shone in the sunlight, with manicured gardens and high walls that kept the world at bay. It was a life of service, but one that Eli had grown accustomed to. He had learned to keep his head down, to obey the commands of his masters without question. But today was different. Today there was talk in the servants' quarters that something new was coming. Word had spread that Lady Zora, his cruel and demanding mistress, had purchased a new slave, another alien as was her habit. There were whispers about her being from a far-off planet, a place where only the wealthiest of aliens could go to buy such exotic creatures. Eli was curious, but he didn't let it show. He had seen new slaves come and go over the years, most of them fearful, broken, and weak. They didn't last long under Lady Zora's harsh rule. She was known for her temper, and no one dared defy her. But there was something about this new acquisition that intrigued him. The rumors were that she was different. This alien wasn't like the others. Some even said she had a certain strength in her eyes, a look of defiance that no one had ever seen in Lady Zora's slaves. As Eli worked in the garden that morning, he couldn't help but glance toward the mansion, wondering about this new arrival. His thoughts were interrupted by the heavy footsteps of Lady Zora's guards. They were bringing her in. Eli didn't know what to expect, but when the alien woman appeared, he froze. She was unlike any other alien he had seen before. She was tall, with smooth, silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Her eyes were the color of the deep ocean, dark and intense, yet filled with an ancient sadness. Her hair, black as midnight, cascaded down her back in thick waves. There was a regal air about her, something that made Eli feel as though he were in the presence of someone much more important than a mere slave. Lady Zora stood next to the woman, her hand resting on the alien's shoulder, a possessive gesture. Eli could see the way the woman held herself, head held high, eyes straight ahead, never looking down, never showing any sign of weakness. It was clear that she wasn't like the others. She wasn't broken. She wasn't afraid. Her name is Lyra, Lady Zora announced to the small group of servants who had gathered to watch. She's from the Netherian system. You will treat her as you treat all slaves, but be warned, she has a temper. Don't provoke her. Lady Zora's voice was sharp, as though she were speaking about an animal that needed to be tamed. Lyra, you will follow my every command. You will work. You will obey. But Lyra didn't bow her head. She stood tall and proud, her gaze unwavering. For a moment it seemed as though she might speak, might protest, but she didn't. She simply stared back at Lady Zora, her expression unreadable. Eli watched the exchange with growing interest. There was something about this woman, this alien, that made him want to know more. Unlike the others who had come before her, she didn't cower in front of Lady Zora. She didn't act like a slave. Eli had always wondered why the alien slaves he worked with were so obedient, so broken. But Lyra was different. There was a fire in her, a strength that couldn't be hidden, even behind her silence. After Lady Zora finished her orders, she gestured for the guards to take Lyra inside. The other servants returned to their tasks. But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. Lyra's presence was like a storm cloud on the horizon, and he was left wondering what kind of person could stand up to Lady Zora without fear. As the day wore on, Eli found his thoughts drifting back to Lyra. He hadn't seen her again after that first encounter, but her image lingered in his mind. He couldn't help but feel drawn to her, to the mystery that surrounded her. There was something about her, something that told Eli she wasn't just another slave. She wasn't just a possession to be bought and sold. She had a purpose, a story, and Eli found himself wanting to know what it was. Later that evening, as Eli was cleaning the main hall, he saw her again. Lyra was standing by the large windows, looking out at the stars, her back to him. There was something so calm about her, as though the world outside didn't matter. It was as if she had a strength inside her that nothing could touch. Eli hesitated, wondering if he should approach her. But his curiosity got the better of him, and he took a cautious step forward. He cleared his throat softly, not wanting to startle her. "Lyra," he said, his voice low. "I've been told you're from the Netharian system. Is that true?" Lyra turned slowly to face him. Her gaze was steady, unreadable, but there was no malice in it. She nodded once, as if acknowledging his question. "I am from Netharia." Eli couldn't help but notice the way her voice carried, quiet but firm. It was the voice of someone who had seen more than she let on, someone who had lived through things Eli couldn't even begin to imagine. "I've never met anyone from there," Eli continued, trying to make conversation. "What's it like?" Lyra's eyes flickered for a moment, a shadow passing across her face. For a brief second, Eli thought he saw a flash of something, perhaps pain, perhaps regret. But it was gone almost as soon as it appeared. She remained silent, her gaze never leaving his. "I'm not like the others," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Eli's heart skipped a beat. The way she said it, so simply but with so much weight, made him feel like he had just unlocked a secret. He wanted to ask more, to pry into her past, but he knew better than to press too hard. Lyra wasn't someone who could be easily understood. She was a puzzle, a mystery wrapped in skin, and Eli knew he was just beginning to scratch the surface. As the night deepened, Eli found himself unable to stop thinking about Lyra. She was unlike any alien he had ever met, and her presence lingered in his mind. The new slave was no ordinary servant. Eli knew this for sure. What he didn't know yet was how deep the mystery ran, or just how much his life would change because of her. The days that followed were uneventful for the most part. Eli kept to his duties on the estate, carrying out the orders of Lady Zora without question, his mind occasionally drifting back to the new slave, Lyra. She was always there, in the background, silently fulfilling her duties. Eli couldn't help but notice how different she was from the other slaves. Most of the others moved through their tasks like automatons, their eyes downcast, afraid to look anyone in the eye. But not Lyra. She walked with grace, head held high. Her movements fluid and confident. There was a strength in her that made her stand out from the others. Eli's curiosity continued to grow. He often found himself watching her when he could. He noticed how she would sometimes pause in the middle of her tasks, as if she were lost in thought. It was in these moments that Eli saw the most of her, when she thought no one was watching. It was in those moments that her true self seemed to slip through the cracks of her composed exterior. There was something deeply intelligent in the way she carried herself. She was different, not just in appearance, but in spirit. It wasn't long before Eli's curiosity turned into something more. He began to seek out small opportunities to talk to her, always in hushed tones, never wanting to draw attention to their exchanges. Lyra rarely spoke, but when she did, her words were carefully chosen. It was clear that she was used to keeping her thoughts to herself, but there was an undeniable spark of intelligence in her eyes. She wasn't just another slave, another broken soul to serve her master. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the estate was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Eli found himself once again in the garden. He was finishing up his work, wiping down the stone paths and trimming the hedges when he saw her. Lyra was standing near the far end of the garden, her back to him. For a moment, Eli hesitated. He knew the rules. No servant was allowed to speak to another slave unless ordered. But there was something about her that pulled him in, something that made him forget the rules. He took a step forward, then another. His heart raced. When he was just a few feet away, he cleared his throat softly. "Lyra," he said quietly, hoping his voice wouldn't carry in the stillness of the evening. She turned slowly, her dark eyes locking with his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath. Lyra's gaze was intense, but there was no malice in it. Instead, there was something else, something unspoken, something that seemed to reach out to him. Eli found himself drawn in by her silence. He took another step closer, now standing just a few feet away from her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra didn't respond immediately. She looked away, her eyes scanning the garden as if searching for something in the distance. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "I'm fine," she said softly, her voice like a cool breeze. "I'm just thinking." Eli nodded, not knowing what to say next. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and almost tangible. He wanted to ask her more, to know more about her, but he didn't want to push too far. The silence stretched between them, comfortable yet full of unspoken words. Eli finally spoke again. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked, his voice almost timid. Lyra turned to face him again, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to understand the meaning of his question. "Miss what?" she asked, her tone cautious but not unfriendly. "The life you had," Eli said, not sure if he should continue. "Before all of this?" Lyra's expression softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at the ground, as if the very question had stirred something painful within her. Eli wanted to take the question back, but it was too late now. He had already opened the door to something deeper, something that Lyra wasn't ready to share. After a long pause, Lyra finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "I never had a life like you think I did." Eli frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I didn't live on a peaceful planet, Eli," she said softly. "I wasn't born into luxury or wealth. I was born into war." Eli's heart skipped a beat. He had never imagined that this beautiful, mysterious woman could have been a part of something as brutal as war. He didn't know what to say, so he stayed quiet, giving her space to continue. Lyra glanced up at the stars above them, her face softening as she spoke. "My people were once great, but we were torn apart by greed, by betrayal. I've seen things that no one should ever have to see." She paused, as though gathering her thoughts. "I was supposed to be someone important, but now I'm just a slave." Eli's heart ached for her, but he didn't know how to comfort her. What could he say? He had no answers for the pain that was clearly etched into her eyes. He had never lived through anything like what she had described, and he could never understand the weight of her past, but he could listen. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his voice sincere. Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time, Eli saw a flicker of something in her eyes. A recognition, perhaps, or an acknowledgement. She didn't speak for a long while, and Eli thought she might not say anything more, but then she did. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling of the leaves. "It's been a long time since anyone bothered to ask." Eli smiled, relieved that he hadn't pushed her too far. There was something about her that made him feel like he needed to protect her, something that made him want to help her. But he knew there was nothing he could do. She was a slave, and he was just a servant. As the evening grew darker, they stood there in silence, the weight of their words lingering between them. Eli didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: his life and his thoughts would never be the same after this. The days seemed to blend together for Eli as he carried out his tasks. Each day felt like a repetition of the last, waking early to tend to the garden, cleaning the hallways of Lady Zora's grand estate, and serving his master's guests when they arrived. It was a life that was predictable, controlled, and, for the most part, dull. But there was something different now. Every time Eli looked at Lyra, every time he spoke to her in those quiet moments they shared, a sense of unease grew inside him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he was certain that she wasn't who she appeared to be. Lyra wasn't like the other slaves. Eli had seen enough of them to know their patterns, their silence, their obedience, their fear. But Lyra was different. She carried herself with such quiet confidence, like someone who had once known power. She didn't flinch when Lady Zora shouted orders at her, and she never seemed to cower in front of anyone. It was as if she was playing a role, hiding something beneath the surface. And then there were the strange moments when Lyra's behavior seemed to slip. Once Eli had been cleaning the kitchen when he overheard a conversation between Lyra and a guard. It was brief, but in the few seconds he had listened, he heard something that sent a chill down his spine. Lyra had spoken a language Eli didn't recognize, words that were too fluid, too perfect. They didn't belong to any of the alien dialects he had learned over the years. And then, just as quickly as it started, the conversation was over. The guard turned away, and Lyra went back to her duties, as if nothing had happened. Eli tried to shake the feeling. He couldn't afford to let his suspicions get the best of him. After all, what did he really know about her? She was a slave, bought and sold just like the rest. But the more he watched her, the more he began to see the cracks in her story. She was too poised, too calm. There was something hidden in her eyes, something that didn't match the life of a servant. That night, as Eli worked in the garden once again, he found himself staring at Lyra as she passed by him on her way to the servants' quarters. She seemed deep in thought, her mind somewhere far away, but there was a tension in her movements that Eli couldn't ignore. His curiosity got the better of him, and once again, he found himself walking towards her. Lyra, he called softly, his voice carrying across the quiet night. "Can we talk?" She stopped and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice, she spoke. "What is it, Eli?" Eli hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to word the question that had been gnawing at him. "I've been thinking about you, about where you're from. You don't seem like the others. You don't act like the other slaves." Lyra's eyes flickered, but her expression remained calm. "I'm just like everyone else, Eli," she said, her voice smooth, yet there was an edge to it that he hadn't heard before. "No," Eli said, shaking his head. "I don't believe that. You speak a language no one here knows, and sometimes I see something in your eyes, something that doesn't belong here. What is it? What are you hiding?" For a moment, the air between them seemed to crackle with tension. Lyra stood still, her gaze never leaving Eli's face. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the inner conflict, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, her gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "I don't want trouble," she finally said, her voice soft but firm. "It's better for both of us if you leave this alone." Eli frowned. "But I can't. I don't understand." "You're not like the others, Lyra, I know that." She was silent for a long time, and Eli wondered if she would walk away, leaving him with nothing but unanswered questions. But then, to his surprise, she spoke again. "I'm not what I seem," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "But it's not something I can explain. It's too dangerous." Eli's heart raced. There it was, the confirmation he had been waiting for. Lyra was hiding something, something big, and she was afraid. But afraid of what? "Dangerous?" Eli repeated. "What do you mean?" Lyra's eyes darted around, scanning the garden as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. Her movements were quick and cautious. "There are things you don't understand, Eli, things you don't want to." "Then help me understand," Eli urged. "I want to help you, Lyra. I don't want to see you suffer." For a moment, Lyra seemed to wrestle with herself, torn between saying more and keeping the truth locked away. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just be careful, Eli. Don't trust anyone here. Not even Lady Zora." The warning sent a chill through him. Eli's mind raced with the possibilities. What was Lyra trying to say? Was she in danger? And if she was, how far did it go? Before he could ask more, Lyra turned and started walking away, her steps quick and determined. Eli stood there, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and suspicion. He knew there was more to her story, more than she was letting on. But the question was, would she ever trust him enough to tell him the truth? As he watched her disappear into the distance, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The secrets that Lyra was hiding were deeper than he had first realized, and he was now tangled in them whether he liked it or not. But one thing was clear. Whatever she was running from, whatever danger she was in, Eli would find out. He had to, because he couldn't stand the thought of leaving her to face it alone. The next few days passed in a strange silence for Eli. His mind was preoccupied with Lyra, the secrets she held, and the words she had shared with him. The warning she gave him echoed in his mind. Don't trust anyone here, not even Lady Zora. Eli had always known that Lady Zora wasn't kind, but he never imagined that there could be something darker lurking beneath the surface of her rule. But what could it all mean? And why had Lyra felt the need to warn him so seriously? Eli went about his daily chores, working in the garden and cleaning the halls, but his mind kept returning to the same questions. What was Lyra hiding? Was she really a mere slave, as Lady Zora claimed? Or was there something more to her, something far more dangerous? One evening, as Eli was finishing his work in the garden, he caught sight of Lyra again. This time, she wasn't walking with the same calm demeanor he was used to. There was a sense of urgency in her movements. Her eyes flickered nervously as she passed by, and for a moment, their gazes met. Eli saw the same quiet intensity in her eyes, but now there was also something else. Fear. He had never seen her afraid before. "Lyra," he called softly, almost hesitant to approach her. But the urge to know more, to understand what was going on, pushed him forward. Lyra stopped, but she didn't turn to face him immediately. She took a deep breath, her shoulders stiff, before finally turning to meet his gaze. "What do you want, Eli?" Her voice was cool, guarded, and her usual calm demeanor was gone. I don't want trouble," Eli said, feeling unsure. "But you've been acting differently lately, I can see it. I'm just trying to understand what's going on." Lyra glanced over her shoulder, as if making sure no one was watching them. "It's not something you can understand," she said quietly. "And it's not something you should know. You're better off not asking." Eli's heart sank. The more she pushed him away, the more his curiosity grew. There was clearly something she was hiding, something that made her afraid to even talk to him openly. He couldn't just let it go. "I want to help," he said, his voice steady. "You've already told me enough to make me worried. I don't want to see you in danger. If there's something I can do—" "No." Her voice was sharp now, and Eli was taken aback by the force in her words. "You don't understand. You can't help me. I have to do this alone." Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and for a long moment, Eli didn't know what to say. He had always been a servant, a silent observer to the lives of those around him, but now, for the first time, he felt the urge to do something more. He had to know the truth. "What's really going on, Lyra?" he asked, his voice softer now, as if trying to show her that he meant no harm. "Please, just tell me. You can trust me." Lyra's expression softened, but her eyes remained full of uncertainty. She glanced around once more, then took a few steps closer to Eli, lowering her voice. "I can't tell you everything," she whispered, "but you deserve to know a part of the truth." Eli stood still, his breath caught in his throat as Lyra continued. "I'm not just any slave. I was the princess of the Netharian Empire. I was once a leader, someone with power and authority, someone who could have changed the fate of my people." She paused, looking as though the very words she spoke were weighing her down. "But my empire fell. A betrayal from within, a coup that killed everyone who stood with me. My family is gone. My people are gone." Eli's heart raced as he took in her words. Princess? A ruler once? It was hard to believe, looking at the woman who had been sold into slavery. She had been so composed, so calm in the face of everything, yet now he could see the pain hidden beneath her calm exterior. "But why?" Eli asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why keep this a secret?" Lyra's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "If I had revealed myself, I would have been hunted down. The enemies of my family want me dead. They want to erase any trace of the Netharian bloodline. If anyone knew who I truly was, they would have come for me, and I would have been killed long ago." Eli was stunned. He had never imagined that Lyra's past was so full of pain and loss. The thought of her being hunted, of her people's destruction, made him sick to his stomach. But he also felt a sense of awe. Lyra had been a princess, and now she was standing before him, a slave. She had survived a massacre and was living, in a world that no longer recognized her as anything other than a servant. "What will you do?" Eli asked, feeling a deep sense of respect for her. "How can you survive, after everything that happened?" Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze distant. "I survive by hiding, by playing the role of a slave, by doing what I must to stay alive. But there's something else, something I've been waiting for, a chance to reclaim what was stolen from me." Eli frowned. "What do you mean? What are you waiting for?" Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, Eli saw a flicker of hope in them. "I'm waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity to get what I need, the artifact that could give me the power to rebuild my empire. It's hidden here, in this estate, and I've been looking for it ever since I arrived." Eli's mind raced. An artifact, hidden in the estate? It didn't make sense. But then, looking at Lyra's serious expression, he realized that there was more to her story than he had ever imagined. She wasn't just a slave. She was a woman with a mission, and she had been playing the part of a servant to stay alive. "Can I help?" Eli asked, his voice earnest. He couldn't deny the urge to be part of this, whatever it was. He felt drawn to her cause, and he wanted to help her in any way he could. Lyra hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his sincerity. "I don't know if I can trust you completely, Eli," she said slowly, "but maybe you can. I will need someone to help me. The risks are great, and the enemies I have are powerful. But if you're willing to stand by me, then maybe there's hope." Eli's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to stand with Lyra and help her reclaim what was hers. It wasn't just about helping her anymore. It was about making a difference, about fighting for something bigger than himself. "I'll help you, Lyra," he said firmly. "No matter what happens, I'll stand by you." Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, Eli saw a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The following days were filled with a sense of urgency that Eli had never felt before. Lyra's revelation about her past, about her true identity as the princess of the Netherian Empire, had shocked him. But more than that, it had stirred something inside him, a determination to help her reclaim what was hers, to be part of something that mattered. Eli's thoughts raced constantly as he worked in the estate. Every glance he cast toward Lady Zora, every meeting with the other servants, now felt charged with hidden meaning. He could no longer ignore the feeling that he was playing a part in something bigger than himself, and the weight of that knowledge pressed heavily on his chest. Lyra had been cautious since their conversation. She didn't seek him out, and they barely exchanged words. But Eli knew that the silence between them was not a sign of distance. She was planning. She had told him as much. She was waiting for the right moment to act, the right opportunity to retrieve the artifact that could help her rebuild her empire. But that moment hadn't come yet. For Eli, it felt like everything was building to something. He couldn't just sit idly by anymore. He needed to be a part of the plan. He needed to help her, even if he didn't fully understand all the risks involved. That night, as the mansion settled into a deep quiet, Eli found himself sneaking into the servants' quarters where he knew Lyra would be resting. It was late, and the estate was mostly asleep, save for a few night guards patrolling the grounds. Lyra's room was simple, sparse, nothing like the luxurious chambers of Lady Zora. But it was clear that Lyra had made it her own in some way, despite her circumstances. A small desk sat in the corner, covered in papers and strange symbols that Eli couldn't understand. He had never seen her draw or write before, and it made him wonder what kind of plans she was making. Lyra was sitting at the desk, her back to the door when Eli entered. She didn't turn around but spoke quietly. "I knew you'd come." Eli paused for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. "Lyra, He stopped himself. "I want to help. I can't just sit here and do nothing." "You're right. There's something more at stake here than just being a servant." She finally turned, her dark eyes meeting his, and for the first time, Eli saw something different in her. Perhaps trust, perhaps relief. "I know you want to help, Eli, but this is dangerous. If we're caught—" "I know," Eli interrupted, his voice firm. "But you don't have to do this alone. I can help you. I don't care about the risk." "I care about you. And I care about what you're fighting for." There was a long silence, and Eli wasn't sure if he had said the right thing. Lyra seemed to consider his words carefully before finally speaking again. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "This isn't something I can do alone, and it's more dangerous than you realize. But I've been planning. I've been waiting for the moment when I can take back what was stolen from me. The artifact. It's hidden somewhere within this estate. It's an ancient relic, one that has the power to bring my people back. But I need someone I can trust to help me retrieve it." Eli nodded, the gravity of the situation settling deeper within him. "Where is it?" Lyra looked at him for a moment, her gaze intense, and then turned her attention to a map spread across the desk. "It's hidden in the deepest chamber of the estate, a place no one is allowed to enter except for Lady Zora. She doesn't know the full significance of it, but she keeps it locked away. Only she has the key." Eli looked down at the map, trying to memorize the layout. It wasn't the kind of place he would be able to just walk into without getting caught. "How do we get in?" "I've been studying the layout of the estate." "For months," Lyra explained. "I've watched the guards, learned the patrols. There are certain times when the guards change shifts, and the mansion is left vulnerable. That's when we'll act. We can slip into the chambers unnoticed, but we need to be quick." Eli's mind raced as he took in the plan. He wasn't an expert in stealth or tactics, but he could feel the adrenaline rising. He was going to help Lyra. He had no choice now. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steady. What do we do next? Lyra looked at him with a faint smile, one that showed both relief and sadness. First, we need to get the key from Lady Zora. Without it, we won't be able to enter the chamber. It won't be easy. Zora keeps the key close, always on her person. But I've watched her, too. I know when she's most vulnerable. Eli listened closely, trying to pick up every detail. When will that be? Tomorrow night, Lyra said. Lady Zora will be attending a banquet in the city. The guards will be distracted and her chambers will be empty. That's when we strike. Eli felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. This was real. It wasn't just a plan anymore. They were about to steal something from Lady Zora, something that could change the course of Lyra's life. It was a dangerous move, but it was the only one they had. I'm ready, Eli said firmly. Lyra nodded, her eyes softening. Thank you, Eli. I know you understand what's at stake. But once we start this, there's no turning back. Are you sure you want to go through with it? Eli didn't hesitate. I'm sure. I'll do whatever it takes. There was a moment of silence, and then Lyra stood up, walking over to the door and checking to make sure the hallway was clear. Tomorrow night, then. We'll need to be prepared. The plan is risky, but we have to try. For my people. For my family. As the night wore on, Eli lay awake, his mind consumed by the plan. Tomorrow night would be the beginning of something big, something that could change everything for Lyra and for him. The path ahead was dangerous, and they couldn't afford to fail. But Eli had made his choice. He would stand by Lyra no matter what. The day of the heist arrived far quicker than Eli had anticipated. The hours felt like minutes as the time for their plan drew nearer. He had spent the morning finishing his chores, keeping an eye on the movements of Lady Zora's guards and ensuring that everything was in place for the night. Every time he crossed paths with Lyra, their glances exchanged unspoken words, words of nervous anticipation, of the weight of what they were about to do. Tonight was the night. Tonight, they would make their move. As the sun began to set, the estate grew quieter. Lady Zora had left for the city to attend a banquet, and the guards had relaxed, knowing that their mistress wouldn't return until the morning. Eli had never seen the mansion so still, so vulnerable. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound felt amplified in the stillness. The house, which had always seemed so grand and intimidating, now felt like a fortress with its defenses. Down Eli met Lyra in the shadow of the mansion's west wing. Her dark eyes were filled with determination, but there was also something else, something he couldn't quite place. Fear? Hope? Perhaps both. She looked more like a warrior than a slave in that moment, and Eli couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She was no longer just the quiet, mysterious alien who had captured his curiosity. She was a leader, someone who had lost everything but had not given up. You ready? Eli whispered, trying to steady his nerves. Lyra nodded, her voice low. We don't have much time. Once we're inside, we'll have a small window to act before the guards change shifts again. We'll have to move quickly. Eli felt the adrenaline course through his veins. He nodded in return, his heart beating faster with each passing moment. Let's do this. They slipped into the mansion's halls with practiced ease, their footsteps silent against the polished floors. Eli's mind raced as they moved through the corridors. He had always been a servant here, but now he was playing a role he never thought he would. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, every turn could lead to disaster. But he wasn't alone. Lyra was with him, and he had made a promise. They reached the wing where Lady Zora's chambers were located, the door standing tall before them like a barrier between them and their goal. Lyra motioned for Eli to stay behind as she moved forward, her movements calculated, smooth. She reached for a small hidden compartment on the wall, a place that only she knew about, a secret she had discovered during her time in the estate. Inside, she pulled out a thin, glimmering device, a tool that could bypass the security on Lady Zora's door. Eli's breath caught in his throat as Lyra worked the lock with the precision of someone who had done this before. She was quick, but there was a tension in her every movement, as if she was trying to outrun something. After what felt like an eternity, the door clicked open. Lyra gave Eli a small, reassuring nod, and together, they slipped inside. The room was lavish, filled with elegant furniture, tapestries hanging from the walls, and soft lighting that cast gentle shadows across the space. But Eli's eyes weren't drawn to the opulence. He knew what they had come for. He looked around the room, searching for the key that could unlock everything. Lyra moved toward the large desk in the center of the room, her eyes scanning the surface. She touched a small box, one that she had seen Lady Zora open many times before. It was a small chest, made of dark wood with intricate carvings along the edges. Lyra paused for a moment, her hand hovering over it, then opened it with a soft click. Inside was a small, shining key, the key to the hidden chamber where the artifact was kept. Lyra took a deep breath, her fingers closing around it, and turned to Eli. Her face was a mixture of triumph and unease. This was the moment. They had what they needed. But just as she was about to turn to leave, they heard the sound of footsteps in the hall, a loud, unmistakable sound of boots on the marble floor. "Eli!" Lyra whispered urgently. "Go! Hide! Now!" Eli's heart skipped a beat. He turned quickly, his eyes darting around the room. There was nowhere to hide, no closet, no shadows that could swallow him whole. Lyra was already moving, slipping behind a heavy curtain. She motioned for him to follow her, but Eli was frozen. They hadn't planned for this. The footsteps grew, louder. Panic surged through him. He had to act fast. Thinking quickly, he dashed to the nearest shelf, crouching behind a tall vase and holding his breath. His heart pounded in his chest, every sound outside seeming to grow louder, the tension unbearable. The door to Lady Zora's room creaked open. Eli's pulse quickened as he heard the sound of Lady Zora's voice, low and cold. "What are you doing in my chambers?" It wasn't Lady Zora. Eli's mind screamed as he recognized the voice. One of the guards was standing in the doorway, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the room. Eli pressed himself against the shelf, barely daring to breathe. His only hope was that the guard wouldn't look around, wouldn't notice the two intruders hiding in plain sight. Lyra was still behind the curtain, her breath steady, but her eyes wide with fear. She watched the guard carefully, waiting for the right moment to make a move. Eli knew that they couldn't stay hidden for long. They had to act fast, or they would be caught. The guard took a few steps into the room, his eyes scanning the surroundings, but not looking at the curtain where Lyra was hiding. He muttered something to himself, then turned to leave. It was now or never. Lyra darted out from behind the curtain, moving with the swiftness of someone who had spent years evading danger. She grabbed the guard by the shoulder and spun him around, pressing a blade to his throat in one smooth motion. The guard froze, his eyes wide with surprise and fear. "Move!" Lyra ordered, her voice cold. "You won't make a sound, not a single step." Eli's breath caught in his throat as he watched the scene unfold. His mind raced with panic, but Lyra seemed calm, controlled. She had everything in hand, but then a sound from behind, the unmistakable click of a weapon being drawn. Eli spun around, his heart in his throat, just as Lady Zora stepped into the room, a blaster raised in her hand. Her eyes locked onto Eli, and for the first time, there was a flicker of recognition in her cold gaze. "Well, well," she said, her voice smooth and mocking. "It seems we have a little problem, don't we, Eli?" Eli's heart pounded in his chest as Lady Zora's cold eyes locked onto him. The blaster in her hand glinted under the soft light of the room. He could feel the weight of her gaze, piercing through him, as if she was weighing his very soul. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. "Eli," Lady Zora said, her voice smooth, almost too calm. "I must admit, I never thought it would be you. The quiet servant playing your part so well. But I suppose all masks slip eventually." Eli swallowed, his mind racing. He glanced over at Lyra, who still held the guard in a tight grip, her weapon steady against his throat. She didn't move, her eyes locked on Lady Zora, but Eli could see the tension in her muscles. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and now there was no way out unless they acted fast. "Lady Zora," Eli said, his voice shaky but defiant. "You don't have to do this. We don't want any trouble. Just let us go. You can have the key. You can have everything." Lady Zora's lips curled into a small smile. "You think this is about the key?" "No, Eli, it's about control, power. You've been a useful little pawn, but I never intended to let you walk away. You and this princess," she sneered, looking at Lyra. "You're both fools if you think you can escape me." Eli's stomach twisted with the realization that Lady Zora had always known more than she let on. The game had never been as simple as a key or a slave's rebellion. It had always been about control, about maintaining dominance over everyone, even those who thought they could hide in the shadows. But Lyra, standing tall with a look of unwavering determination, wasn't backing down. She tightened her grip on the guard, her eyes still on Zora, but Eli could see the strain in her expression. She wasn't just a princess. She was a warrior, and even in the face of danger, she stood her ground. "You've already lost, Zora," Lyra said, her voice low but strong. "You just don't know it yet." Lady Zora's smile faltered for a moment, and Eli saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. It was brief, but it was there. Lyra's words had struck a chord. But Zora quickly recovered, her composure returning with terrifying speed. "No, you are the one who is lost," Zora snapped, her blaster never wavering. "Do you really think you can just walk out of here with everything? Do you think I will allow you to destroy everything I've built?" The room fell into a tense silence. Eli could feel the heat of the blaster aimed directly at him, and it took everything in him to keep his voice steady. "We didn't come here to destroy you," Eli said, taking a deep breath. "We came to take back what was stolen, to give Lyra a chance at reclaiming her home." Lady Zora's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Reclaim her home? Do you really believe that she can do that, Eli? She is nothing, just a broken princess, pretending to be something she's not. You are nothing, just a servant caught in the crossfire." Eli's hands tightened into fists at his sides, his blood boiling at the words. He had always been a servant, but tonight, that title meant nothing. He wasn't just anyone's pawn anymore. He had a choice now. And so did Lyra. Lyra's eyes met Eli's, and in that fleeting moment, something passed between them, understanding, trust, and a shared resolve. They had come this far. They couldn't turn back now. Eli took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on Lady Zora. "Maybe I'm nothing to you, but I'm something to her," he said, his voice steady now. "I'm someone who is willing to fight for what's right. I'm someone who believes that the people who have been crushed like Lyra can rise again, and we will, no matter what you throw at us." Zora's face twisted with fury, but before she could respond, Lyra moved. In one swift motion, she shoved the guard aside, her weapon slashing through the air in a blur. The guard stumbled back, gasping, but Lyra didn't hesitate. She reached for the blaster that Lady Zora had dropped in her moment of rage and aimed it at the woman who had once been her captor. "You think you can control everything?" "Zora," Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with authority. "But this is where your control ends." Lady Zora raised her hands slowly, her eyes full of defiance. "You think a simple weapon will stop me? I am far more powerful than you understand. I am the one who rules this estate. You are nothing but a shadow in my eyes." But Lyra didn't flinch. Her grip on the blaster remained steady, and her gaze never wavered. "You may control this estate, but you do not control me, and you will never control him again," she said, glancing at Eli. For a long moment, the room was still, like the calm before a storm. Then, with a deep breath, Lyra took a step forward, her voice low and unwavering. "It's over, Zora. The time of your rule is finished." Eli's heart raced as he watched the tension unfold. He knew that this was it, the point of no return. Either they would walk away, free, or they would pay the price for their defiance. Lady Zora glared at them, her expression cold and calculating. But there was no more anger in her eyes. There was no more confidence, only a realization that she had been outmaneuvered. And for the first time, it seemed as if the power she had so carefully built was slipping through her fingers. You'll regret this," Zora hissed, but there was no conviction in her words. Lyra shook her head. "No, it's you who will regret it." With that, she stepped back, motioning for Eli to follow her. They turned toward the door, their goal now within reach. Lyra had the key. They had the blaster. They had each other. And in that moment, Eli realized that the choice he had made, to stand with Lyra, to stand for what was right, had changed everything. This was the beginning of something new, something that could not be undone. As they left the room, Eli glanced back one last time. Lady Zora stood frozen, a figure of rage and defeat. And as the door closed behind them, Eli felt a sense of freedom he had never known before. They were free, and nothing could stop them now.